This is the Ask a Photographer podcast, answering your photography-related questions about general photography, workflow, editing, business, and marketing. To submit a question, go to biblino.com/ask. Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. My name is Mike, and I'm from biblino.com. Today's question comes from Melissa, and Melissa's asking, when I print my photos, I get white space at the top or bottom of the photo. The attendant at the kiosk said I need to crop my photos. I now notice that there is an option to crop with the aspect ratio of the camera or for a print size in Lightroom. What is the best way to crop my photos? Hey Melissa, thanks for your question. And this with cropping, there is no right or wrong way in general. Photography being a creative medium, you can crop any which way you want. But what I would give advice in this case is to crop for the end result. So your end result being that you're trying to print your photos. You haven't mentioned which size. Generally, if you're printing, say, to like an 8x10 and you haven't cropped the photo or it's not resized in the correct size, you're going to get, say, the white lines at the top and bottom, which you've pointed out here. Cropping for end results, you should be doing that anyway because it just makes life a lot easier. Generally, what I would do is use the aspect ratio of my sensor, which is 2x3. So 3 being the long side down the bottom and the side being 2. The aspect ratio of an 8x10 photo is, I think, 4x5, which is close to a square. 3x2, which is what your sensor or most people's sensors are, it's actually a rectangle, which would explain why you're getting those white bars. And if you can imagine, it's trying to shrink the photo into the paper. There's two things happening. One, you're going to get the white bars because it shrinks into it, or if it tries to fill the piece of paper completely, because it's your photo started off as a rectangle and it's trying to fit it more into a square shape, you're going to lose the two sides, or the top and bottom, so you can lose some of your photo. Not generally good if you're taking portraits because you're going to chop heads off and the like. So that's just something to think about. So generally what I would do if in Lightroom when I crop, I would set it to the aspect ratio of 2x3, and which is what my sensor is. Crop the photo in such a way that, of course, it's pleasing to the eye. Now, generally, when you're taking photos, you'd want to pre-visualize what your photo is going to look like, so how the cropping is going to be, and how the light's coming in, and how you're going to edit it later on. If you can pre-visualize, say, the cropping, and what you could do is either crop in camera, meaning that use your feet, or if you've got a prime lens, or use the zoom to zoom in. That way, that's how you're cropping in camera. When it comes time to printing, you print to a print size that is suited for that aspect ratio, which would be like a 4x6, let's see, an 8x12, 16x24 inch, a 20 inch by 30 inch. They're the 2x3 ratio prints that you won't have to modify anything if you were just to take a photo, print them off, and you would lose very minimal off the sides or the top and bottom, depending on the orientation. Now, if you want to print, say, to an 8x10, well, that's slightly different. As I mentioned earlier, you will lose a little bit of the photo. If you were, say, for instance, when you photograph your object, or the subject, I should say, don't zoom so much in and just leave a little bit of extra space around. And you're doing that. So when you are editing your photo and you go to crop, you can set it to the aspect ratio for the print size, which would be 8x10. If that's the size, so or 4x5, that type of thing. In fact, it actually doesn't really matter. It could be any size, as long as you leave enough space for when you go and set the crop, the crop to be locked into the aspect ratio. You're giving yourself enough space that it doesn't matter where you print it from, and you crop it. And when you put on a memory card and take it down to the kiosk and print off, it'll be perfect for that print size. The only issue is that if you crop that photo and say you want to print it to a different size that may be a slightly different aspect ratio, that's when you get the white lines. So that's just something to think about. just remember, you shoot a little bit wider, and that will give you a little bit buffer space to play with the cropping. What I generally would do would be just to keep either the print sizes consistent or my cropping consistent. That way I'll know exactly how things will be. But also, if you're, say, for instance, printing, say, to a canvas, you have to put extra space around the photo anyway because of when it wraps around the piece of wood. If, say, for instance, you're framing your print and you want to put like a nice mat around it, so you have the print and then you have a white mat and then you have the frame around that mat. The mat is going to take up a little bit of the photo anyway, so having that little bit extra white space may or may not affect it. It just depends on the photo. Even if you don't have the mat, when you put a photo directly into a frame, you will lose a little bit of that photo anyway. I think that what you're mentioning here, the white space at the top and bottom, when I've printed to an 8x10, which is not a common size here in Australia, people do print to it, but you get those white marks. So that's how I know that's the case. So there you go, Melissa. I hope that answers your question, and thanks for submitting it. If you have a question that you'd like featured on the show, go to biblino.com/ask to submit your question. I'd love to hear what you think of the show by going to iTunes or Stitcher and giving me a review and a rating. And don't forget to subscribe so you get notifications of new episodes. Thanks for listening. Until next time, get out and take more photos. Oh, look, it's a cat in front of a sunset.